Welcome to the Early American Brass Band Podcast's first CD review. I'm joined always here by Stephen Canastracey.
Hi, everybody.
And today we are going to talk about the Saxton Cornet Band's newest album released in 2021, Sounds from the Opera House. So, Stephen, this year started off on a much more positive note than last year because it starts day one, new Early American Brass Band album.
Yeah, they dropped this on New Year's Day on 1/1/2021. So we're already off to a good start here. And I listened to it this morning while I was walking my dog, and it was great. It was great to be out in the cold, but it was, I don't know, it was kind of warm today, a little icy, but it was a good album to listen to while we were walking.
Yeah, I was able to listen to it the first time in the car yesterday, and then I listened to it again this morning, and some really good stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know how we want to do this. Steven, you maybe want to give your initial impressions of the album. We can just kind of talk about what happens to come up over the course of our discussion.
Sure. Yes, I'm pulling it up on my phone here so I can have the track list if I want to reference a specific track. But first off, the album cover is nice. So the album, like we said, is Sounds from the Opera House, and the album cover is looking out at an empty opera house, which I guess they're all kind of empty right now, but it's as if you're on stage looking out. Yeah, very dark. Still got COVID going on in 2021. Obviously, the new year doesn't reset that, but anyway, yeah, you're looking out into an empty opera house, and as the title of the album suggests, this album has a bunch of opera overtures, other opera transcriptions, a few arias, one or two, I think, from some operas. And I was struck, I think, with, well, the first thing that hit my ears when I was listening is whoever mixed and mastered this did a very, very good job. I thought, like, sonically, it sounded very, very good. And I don't know when they did these recordings, because I remember when we interviewed David Goins from Saxton's, they said they had a bunch of stuff in the can and just needed to kind of do all the post-production on it. So I'm not sure when these recordings are from, but they sound very good. I was struck by that. And another thing was just kind of thoughts on the album as a whole. It really kind of reminded me and brought to the forefront like how important bands and brass bands were, back in the 19th century, for like exposing the general public to this kind of music, because like the general public was being exposed to opera through these band transcriptions and stuff where they would hear it every day. I mean, I would argue that the normal person probably heard a brass band a lot more often than an orchestra or like an opera back in those days. So, all these transcriptions and stuff, it really struck me. So, like this was probably how your average person would have, heard this music for the first time. So I thought that was really neat.
Kind of a similar comparison in the book Highbrow, Lowbrow. There's a whole chapter in that about how it's often assumed that Shakespearean plays are kind of this highbrow art form, and that it was for the upper class, people with money. But the book argues that Shakespeare and plays and high art of that time was enjoyed extremely, a ton by the lower class as well. There's a ton of comedy that was not over their heads. There was a lot of themes and general content in those plays that all socio demographics, were able to enjoy, which kind of would be similar to what we're thinking now with opera. A lot of times we think about, going to the Kennedy Center or going to the Met in New York and kind of thinking of this ritzy high-end experience, but opera back then was enjoyed by all people, and it was, in a lot of ways, a form of popular music back in the 19th century as well. So exactly what you're saying, that it's cool being able to hear, a brass band playing this repertoire that would have definitely been enjoyed by all peoples during that time.
Right.
I do enjoy that it's a themed album. I know a lot of times with early brass band albums, you kind of get stuck, kind of playing, the popular songs, the campfire songs, or maybe like the same marches over and over again, which, it's great. I love that music too, but it's awesome hearing, Saxton's put out this themed album of all opera music. We were going to mention this at some point during this discussion. You were mentioning that whoever did the sound mixing and whenever they did the recordings, just some of these unknowns with the album. They are unknown because, unfortunately, since it was a pure digital release, this does not have a physical copy. There's no liner notes. So, unfortunately, some of those details that nerds like you and I like to look up are not readily available. But Saxton's is very responsive through their social media and through their website. So, if anybody does have any questions about the album in particular after this little review, feel free to reach out to them, and they'll be more than happy to answer any of the questions you have about it.
Yeah.
Here's a quiz. Do you know who's playing the all the E flat soprano parts on this album, all the solos?
My guess would be David Goins.
Yeah, it is David Goins. So David was featured in about 3 of the tracks. He was playing E flat soprano solos in the Faust aria, the Norma aria, and the Barber of Seville aria. So a lot of David Goins on there also. Interesting thing about this album is that it kind of serves as a compilation album too. There's a mix of, as you said, Steven, they had things kind of pieced together before and during the pandemic. This album has 2 live recordings on it. The Coronation March from the Prophet and Una Voce Poco Fa from the Barber of Seville are both live recordings, and they were actually taken from performances by Saxtons at the Great American Brass Band Festival. So there's 2 live recordings there. And then actually recycled recordings from a previous album. Their CD, You Naughty Naughty Men, actually has these recordings of Daughter of the Regiment and La Belle Galatea on it. So those 2 recordings are on a previous album. So with those 2, the 2 live recordings, and then all the stuff that was recorded specifically for this album, kind of have a compilation story here a little bit. But again, it all contributes to this theme of operatic music, which I think is awesome.
Yeah, that's good to know. I was wondering whether or not those 2 that you mentioned that were actually live recordings were. I didn't know if they, in the recording session, if the band had clapped afterwards or not to make it appear as it were live. But
like a concert in the park kind of thing.
Right. Yeah. But that's good to know. And then obviously no one's going to complain about recycled recordings when the quality, the playing is so good. That was another thing. It was very clean. There's something very special about when a band is able to, in a march or an overture, really match their staccato note lengths. Like when we listen to the Marine Band or any of the military bands, obviously they play together all the time, so they're going to be right together. And it's just, there's an energy to it. It's just a super nerd thing.
You can tell they play together a lot. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. When things are matched so perfectly like that, it's really exciting to hear, because that's something that I think a lot of people, if it's not there, if it's not really exact, that's an easy thing to kind of pick out and complain about when you're listening to a recording. But that is not the case with this album. And all the playing is great, so it's very enjoyable to listen to.
Yeah, that was one of the things that struck me when listening to the album, especially the first time. You can really tell that the players are all playing really in tune with each other. Some of the intonation on this album just locks in like we're not accustomed to hearing in this medium. I actually had a chance to speak with David Goins yesterday, and he told me that for his solo, the Costa Diva from Norma solo that he did, they actually sight read that in the recording session. They had some extra time, and David kind of had this piece in his back pocket, so he distributed parts, and they essentially sight read that tune and put the single take on the album. So what you hear in that Costa Diva from Norma recording is actually a one take sight read attempt at that piece. And David mentioned in that recording there's a few intonation discrepancies, but overall it being sight read and done in one take, it's a really good representation of the day-to-day Saxton's band, which is phenomenal. They sound amazing. So it's cool to hear some of the more polished tracks on the album as being total energy smiley face the entire time. and then even stuff that they sight read, it's quality is so high, and the intonation even in that recording is so high. I wouldn't have known that they were sight reading it. That's awesome.
Yeah, I would not have known, unless you just told that story like you did. And that's hilarious that they cite Reddit and put it on the album. But I love it. I love hearing all the like stories that like from the recording sessions and like the behind the scenes from the album that, I really enjoyed, hearing that with the Empire and Raymond Mace's episode when we were talking about the American Brass Quintet. All those behind the scenes stories are fantastic. I also loved that. I mean, I guess there's no way to really like take the clicking of the valves and like the linkages, for any rotor valves out. You can hear that in some of the fast stuff and maybe some of the music that's in keys with lots of sharps and flats where you use a lot of 2 and 3 combinations. But I loved hearing that. It's nice. I think this might have been probably not the first, but definitely the second or third like complete album that I've listened to top to bottom like during this whole like pandemic lockdown thing. I really haven't listened to a lot of albums straight through. I know a lot of people are taking all the extra time to listen to a lot of new music, and that's just not what I've been doing. So it was really refreshing, and it made me a little sad, because that's something that you normally might hear in a live performance if you're close to the stage, all that like kind of extra mechanical noise. But I was happy to that might annoy some people, but I was happy to hear it on this album.
Yeah. So that touches on a few points that I wanted to bring up also. The idea that I already said that this is a themed album and that I enjoy that. In addition to that, the word that kept on coming to my mind was refreshing. In terms of the repertoire, getting to hear a full album of orchestral operatic transcriptions for a brass band, I thought was really refreshing. And it's cool because you have some of the arias that the track is just an aria, but then for a lot of the overtures or a lot of like selections from Faust, a lot of those things, you have variety within the pieces too, and you're able to see the dynamic contrast that this band is able to achieve. So with the variety of the repertoire, the freshness of the repertoire, it was really able to showcase Saxton's attention to detail and their musicality, especially in the realm of dynamics. A lot of times we hear these quick steps and these marches and these campfire songs that are just forte the whole time because that's what they needed to be and that's what their function was, and it's great and we love them for that. But with these recordings on this album, really getting to hear within one piece, the loudest of the loud and the softest of the soft, I thought was really, really cool to be able to hear a few times. I think it's even in the opening track. It starts really strong, and you're rocking along with Saxton's, and then it gets to a quiet part, and you kind of have to like lean in a little bit, even on a recording, just to kind of hear what they're doing. Not in a bad way, obviously, but hearing that dynamic contrast was awesome, I thought.
Yeah, I was playing the volume game, even though I was listening to it like with earbuds that are actually in my ear. When the dynamic goes down, you got to click the volume up a little bit. Yeah, and that what you were saying about the variety within the pieces, it's nice to hear a lot of these opera overtures. We'll have the slow introduction and then the fast, exciting allegro part of the overture, and that's something that with some of the other repertoire you don't often get. Like quick steps are quick steps; they start out quick and they stay quick. Marches start out quick and they stay quick. So even just that
they're supposed to.
Yeah, right.
Depends on who's playing.
Right. Yeah. So I didn't mean to cut you off. I know you had some other points that you.
No, it's okay.
Bring up.
You mentioned the clicking of the valves. I have written down that if I have a criticism of the recording, it was that. So it's interesting that you and I are the two sides of that fence that you were talking about. I remember when I was getting into early American brass bands and doing a lot of listening, there were some, early on, there were some recordings where that clicking of the valves was pretty prominent as well. I'm not going to lie, it was a little bit of a turnoff for me, just in the fact that it was distracting. I understand now, having listened to a lot of the music and having hands-on experience with the music, that, like you said, it is part of the charm. It helps reaffirm that they are, in fact, period instruments, because some of this stuff is played so well, you would have figured that it's on modern instruments with how much they're locking in and how well they're mastering these instruments. So, that reminder of the valves is that nice reminder, but at the same time, I can see how, since for me as a inexperienced listener a few years back, being distracted by that sort of thing, I'm wondering if that could be distracting for new listeners to this music as well.
Mm. Yeah, that's a good point. So has that frustration kind of dwindled a little bit, the more you listen to these kinds of albums with the,
Well,
the clicking?
yeah, well, I'll say that like I said, that I do appreciate hearing that as a reminder and knowing how finicky the instruments are and how difficult it is to master the instruments. I appreciate hearing that, kind of like you were saying, but the fact that I'm even aware of it and kind of making the comment, I guess in the back of my mind, it still tells me that it's distracting.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So I'm wondering, we don't know how this album was recorded. We don't know if each person had a microphone behind their bell, if they were spot mic'd, or if it was
Mhm.
more of a recording of the room type of thing. But I would think that either further back recordings in a large room or outdoor recordings, a lot of that type of sound would be mitigated a little bit. I don't
Right.
have the Eighth Green Machine Regiment Band at Mason has done some of its video projects that people are aware of on Facebook, and that's kind of my limited experience with recording this type of music.
Hmm.
So yeah, the fact that the clicking of the valves is so prominent, I'm wondering if it was really a microphone close to each instrument. But I did
Yeah.
also hear that it sounded like it was a mid to low instrument. It didn't sound like it was coming from cornets, which I guess is
Right.
also another indication that I was listening closely enough that I was trying to identify which instrument the clicking was coming from.
Yeah. I guess with the larger, valves, there's more, the surface area and the moving parts are a little bigger, so they might be a little more prone to clicking. I'm not quite sure, but I mean, obviously I don't know, but just from listening to it, I would imagine that the stuff was fairly close mic'd, and at least maybe if every individual was not mic'd, at least like the sections of the band were mic'd.
Mm-hmm.
Like they probably had a microphone for the cornets, for the tenor horns, for the baritones, for the tubas. Um, the percussion I thought was really vibrant and
Yeah, definitely.
exciting when because they don't play all the time throughout every piece. Obviously,
Mm-hmm.
being opera transcriptions, the percussion is going to be a little sparse, and they'll come in with the big moments. But the cymbals, were nice and exciting, and the bass drum was nice and boomy. I'm a sucker for loud bass drum, though, so that's just a personal preference.
Yeah.
So
So to put you on a spot a little bit, do you have a standout track from the recording or a favorite piece? Having gone through it, the few times that you have, anything stand out to you?
I'm not sure. I only listened once through to the whole album, but the I really enjoyed the Coronation March, track 8. The Coronation March from the. I'm waiting for it to scroll. I really enjoyed the Coronation March from the Prophet. That's track 8, I believe. And back 2 tracks, the Kazuti-ko Whirl Overture was
Mm-hmm.
just fun to listen to. I mean, that's a good one. Um, the and obviously there are a fair amount of tunes on here that people are probably going to know. Obviously, there's the Anvil Chorus on here. Some selections
That
from
was the other
Faust,
fun
the
thing. I
Soldier's
thought
Chorus.
that like a lot of songs and tunes that people are aware of when they're listening to this album, I think that a lot of times they're going to be like, "Oh, I didn't know that was from that," kind of thing.
Hmm.
Like they're going to recognize a lot of the music. People are going to be more familiar with the music on this album than they might be aware of just by reading the track list,
Right.
basically, which I think
Yeah.
is a fun little treat for people
Hmm.
going into this.
Yeah. What about you?
Um,
Did you have a favorite or two?
yeah, I really like the opening, the Galatea,
Mm.
uh, the overture there. I thought that was really exciting, and getting to hear again the variety in that piece. Exciting opening, had the variety within the piece, was able to showcase the band. Basically,
Yeah.
all the positive things that we've been talking about is very well demonstrated in that opening track. Um, but I did also really like the Kazuti Whirl overture also, and David Goins told me that was the first time they've performed this piece. They haven't done that live or anything yet, so
Mm.
this album is kind of their premiere of performing that overture. So
Oh, fun.
if we have any fans of the show that are groupies for Saxtons, it's a new release, a new single drops with
Yeah.
Kazuti Whirl overture. It's a lot of fun. Yeah, I think people are going to enjoy that one for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. The whole album is great. It's hard to pick a favorite or two.
Yeah.
Um, Yeah.
Cool. So I don't think for any of these album reviews that we do, we're not going to give any rankings or anything. These are more impressions
Yeah.
videos, but I do you know, highly recommend this album. I think everybody that's taken the time to listen to our impressions, of this album is going to enjoy it. Uh, yeah, and just my closing comment with that is that I think that Sounds from the Opera House by Saxton's Cornet Band is a great masterclass in musicality for early American brass bands. I think a lot of great entertainment and a lot of things people can learn from listening to this album.
Definitely. I would echo that for sure. Very good playing, very good production. Um, yeah, so we'll have links to it where you can find it and buy it and stream it all up on our website. Um,
Yep, the
yeah,
album
so
is
you can
up.
go there.
Yep, the album's already up in our discography resource on the website. It's available through iTunes, Google Music, available to stream for free through Spotify. So please support the band. I purchased it through iTunes. Unfortunately, there's no physical releases of the album, but support the band if you would by purchasing the album through iTunes and enjoy it any way you wish. It's a great treat.
Definitely.
Thank you so much for taking the time to hearing us talk about Saxton Cornet's band's latest album. We look forward to reviewing more albums in the future. Take care.